Welcome to Hope Stories. Imagine being one of the most powerful men in the country, commanding empires of technology, yet utterly powerless in the silence of your own home. Imagine a mansion filled not with laughter, but with the cries of two children who will not sleep, who will not heal, who remind you every night of the woman you couldn't save. What happens when grief becomes louder than love, when success means nothing against the haunting emptiness of loss? And what if, out of nowhere, a stranger walks into that darkness, not with wealth or credentials, but with something far more dangerous, the ability to awaken hope where there was none? Tonight, we'll step into a story that will test the limits of trust, love, and the fragile line between salvation and surrender. And it all begins on a night when silence finally returned to the Anderson home. The Anderson estate stood like a fortress above the glittering lights of Beverly Hills, its marble floors and glass walls whispering of power and wealth. Yet within those walls, nights had become a private hell. Michael Anderson, once the commanding force behind one of Silicon Valley's most celebrated tech empires, was now a prisoner of his own home. For 35 nights straight, the sound of his twin sons, Ethan and Ryan, screaming until dawn tore through the halls like ghosts of grief he could not banish. Nannies came and went, each claiming years of experience, each lasting less than a week. They all left with haunted eyes, muttering about children who would not be soothed, about a house suffocating under something darker than sleeplessness. Michael himself had changed. His once tailored suits now hung loose on his frame. His gaze, once sharp enough to intimidate CEOs, dulled with exhaustion. He had built companies, negotiated billion-dollar deals, and bent markets to his will, yet he could not bring peace to two fragile boys who mirrored the face of the woman he had lost. Sarah, his wife, his anchor, was gone. Cancer had stolen her with merciless speed, and in her absence, the mansion became less a home than a mausoleum echoing with memories and unmet promises. Each night, when the twins' cries reached their fever pitch, Michael would stand outside their door, torn between storming in and collapsing against the wall. He never knew which part of him would win, the father who wanted to hold them, or the man who could not bear to be reminded of all he had failed to protect. It was Emily Parker, his efficient and unshakable assistant, who dared to break the cycle. She appeared in his study late one evening with an idea that sounded too simple, almost reckless. Her cousin knew a young woman named Sophia Ramirez, a 23-year-old from a modest neighborhood in Texas. No Ivy League degree, no references from elite families, just a reputation for calming troubled kids at a community daycare where resources were scarce but love was abundant. Michael laughed bitterly at first. He had hired experts, child psychologists, highly paid nannies from agencies with glossy brochures. What could a girl with no credentials possibly do? But beneath his cynicism lay desperation. And desperation, he knew, had the power to make men gamble on miracles. The next morning, Sophia arrived. Her presence was disarmingly ordinary. A simple blouse tucked into worn jeans, her dark hair pulled into a practical braid. But when the twins dissolved into tears upon seeing a stranger, she did not flinch. Instead, she dropped to the carpet among their scattered toys and began talking to them softly, as though she had entered their storm willingly. Michael stood frozen at the doorway. Within minutes, the impossible happened. The wails subsided, replaced by the tentative sound of giggles. He blinked hard, convinced exhaustion was distorting reality. But no, it was real. His sons, who hadn't laughed in weeks, were laughing now at the silly faces Sophia made with a ragged stuffed bear. That night, for the first time in over a month, the house fell into silence. Michael walked through the halls as if trespassing in a dream. He found Ethan and Ryan sleeping soundly, their tiny chests rising and falling in rhythm, their expressions serene. The star-shaped nightlight painted constellations on the ceiling, and for a fleeting moment, the room felt enchanted rather than cursed. Standing there, Michael felt something he hadn't allowed himself to feel in months: hope. He whispered Sarah's name under his breath, as if she might somehow hear, as if she might forgive him for failing to hold the family together until now. The following morning brought a revelation almost more shocking than the silence. Sophia was already awake, moving through the stainless steel kitchen like it belonged to her. She wore a plain apron, her hair twisted into a bun, her hands steady as she flipped pancakes into animal shapes and poured juice into brightly colored cups. She greeted Michael with a warm "Good morning, Mr. Anderson," as if she had always been part of this home. He stood there, momentarily disarmed by the sight. No nanny before her had cooked breakfast. They ordered in, relied on staff, or ignored the ritual entirely. Family breakfast had died with Sarah, and yet here it was, resurrected by a stranger. At 7:45 sharp, Ethan and Ryan toddled into the kitchen, not crying, not protesting, but calm, sleepy-eyed, curious. They climbed onto chairs as if guided by invisible hands. When Ethan mumbled about dreaming of flying horses and Ryan whispered about building a treehouse where even Sophia lives with us, Michael felt a sharp twist in his chest. For months, the boys had only spoken of their mother through sobs and pleas for her return. Now they mentioned her in dreams where she was smiling, happy because they were happy. It was more than progress. It was transformation. And Michael, sipping coffee brewed to perfection, realized the balance of power in his own home had shifted overnight. Yet with that shift came a gnawing unease. Who exactly was this young woman who walked into his life and within 24 hours accomplished what experts could not? What hidden strength or hidden truth gave her this uncanny influence? As he watched Sophia laugh gently while cleaning jam off Ryan's cheek, Michael wondered if miracles ever arrived without a price. What would you risk to bring peace back into a home shattered by grief? Could you ever trust a stranger who seems to heal wounds no one else could touch? And as Michael studied the quiet figure of Sophia Ramirez, this girl from nowhere who had silenced the ghosts of his mansion, he felt the first shiver of a question he could not yet name, a question that might change everything in ways he was not prepared to face. Michael had not expected the silence to last. He braced himself every night for the return of chaos, convinced that the peace Sophia had created would shatter like glass under the weight of his reality. But each morning came with a new revelation. The twins woke without tears, asked for breakfast, spoke of dreams filled with castles, horses, and their mother smiling at them from some unreachable place. The house itself seemed transformed, lighter, warmer, as if Sarah's absence no longer haunted every corner. For the first time in weeks, Michael could breathe. Yet with relief came an unease that clung to him like a shadow. On the second evening, he lingered outside the children's room and overheard Sophia humming softly as she tucked them into bed. Her voice carried an old lullaby in Spanish, foreign and yet strangely comforting. The boys, who had fought sleep for weeks, surrendered instantly. Michael listened, chest tight, as if he had stumbled upon something sacred. But when Sophia stepped out and found him standing there, her expression faltered for the first time. She looked as though she had revealed too much, and Michael felt an unexpected pang of suspicion pierce through his gratitude. Who was she, truly? And how could she wield this power over his children so effortlessly? The unease deepened when Dr. Henry Mitchell, the boys' longtime pediatrician, called to check on their condition. Only days earlier, he had warned Michael about the severity of their insomnia, hinting at neurological evaluations, even hospitalization. Now, hearing Michael describe the miraculous improvement, the doctor's silence on the line was deafening. "That's extraordinary," Mitchell finally said. "But tell me, what exactly changed? What intervention did you implement?" Michael found himself glancing at Sophia through the glass doors that opened to the garden, where she was kneeling in the grass, blowing soap bubbles while the twins chased them in fits of laughter. He hesitated, realizing he had no real answer, only the presence of this young woman whose resume should never have qualified her for this position. That night, Michael could not sleep. He sat alone in his study, the same room where he had once strategized company takeovers, staring at Sophia's hastily written references lying on his desk. They were vague, handwritten notes from community leaders, daycare staff, none of them carrying the weight of authority he was used to. He was a man who vetted billion-dollar deals down to the smallest clause, yet he had let a stranger with no formal qualifications move into the most intimate part of his life. The father in him was grateful, desperate even, but the businessman in him raged at the recklessness. And beneath both voices was the husband still loyal to Sarah's memory, whispering questions he dared not answer, Would Sarah approve of this woman? Was Sophia a blessing or a threat disguised as one? When Saturday arrived, Michael decided to take the boys out himself. The plan had always been a disaster. Weekends were battles, filled with tantrums and exhaustion. But now, with Sophia's guidance, he dared to believe it could be different. They went to the San Diego Zoo, and to his astonishment, the day unfolded like a storybook. Ethan clutched his hand, asking endless questions about animals, while Ryan sketched flamingos in a notebook Sophia had thoughtfully packed. Other families glanced at them, some with envy, as if they were the picture of stability. For fleeting hours, Michael felt like the father he had always wanted to be. But when he looked at Sophia, watching the boys with an ease he could never master, a storm churned in him. She was not just filling the space Sarah had left, she was reshaping it. The twins adored her. They mentioned her name in dreams, included her in visions of family. And Michael, standing in the midst of laughter, felt something unexpected. Fear. Not of losing control, not of being alone, but of being replaced. What if his children came to see Sophia not as a caretaker, but as something far greater? And what if he himself, against every vow of loyalty he had made to his late wife, was beginning to see her that way too? That night, after the children had fallen asleep, Michael found Sophia in the library, quietly restoring order to the chaos of toys and storybooks. The golden light framed her face in a way that felt disarming. He wanted to thank her, but instead, the words that left his mouth were raw and unplanned. "Why are you really here, Sophia?" She froze, startled, then smiled faintly, as if she had been waiting for this question all along. "Because someone has to help them believe in love again," she answered softly. For a moment, Michael felt the ground beneath him shift. It was not just the children she had come to save. It might be him as well. And that was a truth more terrifying than all the nights of silence and screams that had come before. Do you believe Michael should trust Sophia completely, or should his doubts guide him before it's too late? Because as Michael stared into Sophia's calm, unwavering eyes, he realized that the greatest danger might not be losing his sons, but losing himself to a woman who had arrived like a miracle and might just be the beginning of a new storm. Michael thought the weekend had cemented a fragile peace, a turning point where hope began to outshine despair. But on Monday morning, the illusion cracked. Dr. Henry Mitchell arrived earlier than expected, insisting on a follow-up evaluation of the twins. He was a man Michael trusted implicitly, the one who had delivered both Ethan and Ryan into the world. Yet the doctor's sharp eyes, scanning the children as they played calmly on the living room floor, were not filled with relief, but suspicion. "Remarkable improvement," Mitchell said at last, his voice clipped. "Almost too remarkable. Children don't recover from trauma this quickly without intervention." The pause after the last word hung like a blade. Michael felt his chest tighten. "What are you implying?" he asked. Mitchell adjusted his glasses, his gaze drifting to Sophia, who was kneeling beside Ryan, guiding his hand across a coloring book. "I'm saying," he replied carefully, "that I'd like to know more about her methods. Any sudden behavioral shift in children this age warrants scrutiny." The conversation gnawed at Michael long after the doctor left. Gratitude and doubt warred within him. The results were undeniable. His boys were sleeping, eating, laughing. Yet Mitchell's skepticism planted a seed he couldn't shake. He found himself watching Sophia more closely, questioning details he had ignored before, the way she anticipated the boys' needs with uncanny precision, how she seemed to know their fears before they spoke, how her words disarmed tantrums before they erupted. Was it intuition or something more deliberate, something she hadn't revealed? That night, Michael poured himself a whiskey in the dim glow of his study, staring at the family portrait above the fireplace. Sarah's eyes seemed to follow him, calm but unyielding, as though demanding answers. He whispered to the photograph, "What would you think of her?" But no ghost rose to give him peace. Instead, he was left with the bitter realization that his loyalty to Sarah's memory was now colliding with his duty to protect his sons. To trust Sophia blindly might be reckless. To doubt her might undo the fragile stability she had given them. Both paths felt like betrayal. The following day, his suspicions were tested further. While tucking Ethan into bed, Michael overheard a startling admission. The boy whispered to Sophia, I saw Mommy last night. She told me she's happy we have you. Michael's breath caught in his throat. Ethan spoke with such conviction, such innocence, that it felt less like a dream and more like revelation. He wanted to step inside the room to demand what Sophia had told his son to plant such an image in his mind. But he remained in the hallway, frozen by the collision of grief and wonder. Did Sophia encourage this? Or was it the natural imagination of a child finding comfort at last? Later, when Sophia joined him in the kitchen, Michael could not contain his turmoil. "They're talking about Sarah," he said, his voice low, almost accusing. "They're dreaming of her, saying she's happy because of you. Did you tell them that?" Sophia met his gaze without flinching. "No," she answered softly. "Children carry their parents with them, even when they're gone. Sometimes they just need permission to remember in a way that doesn't hurt." Her words should have soothed him, but instead they unsettled him more. She spoke with a wisdom far beyond her years, a wisdom that seemed to cut directly into the marrow of his grief. That night, Michael lay awake, tormented. He replayed every moment: Sarah's decline, the boy's despair, the endless nights of screaming. Now, almost too suddenly, all of it had shifted. The possibility that Sophia was guiding their recovery into territory he could not control left him terrified. Was she healing them or reshaping them into something new, something he might not recognize? For the first time, Michael questioned whether the miracle he had begged for had come at a hidden cost. Do you believe Sophia's influence is truly a gift of healing, or could it become a dangerous power that even Michael cannot contain? Because as he watched her silhouette pass through the darkened hallway, Michael realized with chilling clarity that his family's salvation might also be the beginning of a deeper, more perilous story. The rain fell in thin, steady lines against the glass walls of the Anderson estate, turning the city lights below into a blur of gold and silver. Michael sat at the dining table long after the boys had gone to bed, a plate of untouched food cooling in front of him. Across the room, Sophia was quietly organizing the twins' art supplies, stacking crayons and paper into neat piles. Her calm efficiency only made the storm inside him worse. The phone call from Dr. Mitchell earlier that day would not leave his mind. The doctor wanted to meet Sophia personally, to study her methods, even to document them. He spoke with professional curiosity, but Michael heard something else beneath the clinical tone: doubt, and perhaps a warning. When he finally broke the silence, his voice was sharper than he intended. "They dream of Sarah. They see her, hear her, as if she's here. Do you understand what that means to me?" Sophia turned, her expression unreadable, but her eyes carried something he couldn't place. Compassion, yes, but also a guarded knowledge. Michael, children don't just imagine safety out of nowhere. They build it from what they're given. If Sarah feels close again, it's because they believe they are allowed to feel joy without betraying her. Her words struck deep, but instead of comfort, he felt anger rise. Who was she to speak of his wife, to interpret his children's visions? That night, while the house slept, Michael retreated to his study. He poured another glass of whiskey, staring at the shadows stretching across the floor. For weeks, he had been pulled between gratitude and suspicion, between awe at Sophia's impact and terror at how quickly she had changed everything. He thought of Sarah's last night alive, how she had squeezed his hand and whispered, "Promise me you'll protect them." He had promised, but now he wondered if he was keeping that vow or surrendering it to a stranger. The truth unsettled him. Part of him needed Sophia as much as his children did. That dependence felt dangerous, almost disloyal. The next morning brought a revelation that shattered what little balance remained. As Michael descended the stairs, he overheard Sophia speaking quietly on the phone in the kitchen. Her Spanish was rapid, urgent, words tumbling out in a way that sounded nothing like the calm voice she used with the boys. He caught fragments. "They're stronger now. Not yet. He doesn't trust." She ended the call quickly when she noticed him. "Just a family matter," she said, smiling too easily. But Michael's stomach twisted. He had built a career on knowing when people were lying, and in that moment, he knew. The entire day he carried the weight of suspicion like a stone in his chest. Was she reporting to someone? Using his family as part of something larger, something hidden? Or was paranoia poisoning his judgment, turning salvation into a threat? The boys remained radiant in her presence, calmer and happier than ever. Ethan sketched animals from their zoo trip with astonishing detail. Ryan painted with colors so bold they covered his tiny hands. Watching them, Michael's heart swelled with pride and dread. Could he risk tearing apart the only stability they had found because of one overheard call? Yet could he risk doing nothing if Sophia was not who she claimed to be? That evening, as he read the boys a bedtime story, Ethan looked up at him with wide, innocent eyes. "Daddy, can Sophia stay forever?" "Mommy said she makes us safe." Michael's throat closed. He forced a smile, kissed his son's forehead, but inside, his world cracked open. Sarah's memory was no longer just preserved. It was being rewritten through the dreams of their children, dreams Sophia seemed to guide without effort. And if Sarah's voice was now tied to Sophia's presence, then losing her would mean ripping away not just stability, but the boys' fragile sense of their mother's blessing. Michael stood in the hallway afterward, paralyzed. For the first time, he was faced with a choice that no wealth, no business acumen, no power could solve. Trust Sophia and risk discovering too late that she was not what she seemed, or confront her and risk shattering the miracle she had brought into his home. Both options felt like betrayal, of his sons, of his wife, of himself. If you were Michael, would you confront Sophia about the phone call, or protect the fragile peace she has created at any cost? Because as the rain beat harder against the windows, Michael realized that the greatest test of his fatherhood was no longer keeping his children safe from the world outside, but from the secret that might be living under his own roof. The following days passed with a deceptive calm, but Michael carried the memory of Sophia's whispered phone call like a wound he couldn't close. He scrutinized every detail, every pause in her speech, every flicker of hesitation in her eyes. Yet Sophia remained steady, almost radiant, as if untouched by his suspicions. The twins, meanwhile, blossomed under her care. Ethan was building towers with intricate precision, asking questions about the stars at night. Ryan painted portraits that startled Michael with their raw emotion. They were thriving, but the more they leaned on Sophia, the more Michael felt the ground shifting beneath his feet. One evening, during dinner, Ethan put down his fork and asked a question that turned the table to stone. "Daddy, if Mommy is happy in heaven because of Sophia, does that mean she sent her to us?" The words landed with a force Michael couldn't bear. His heart raced, his breath caught, and for a moment he thought he might shatter right there in front of them. He managed a weak smile, but his mind spun in chaos. Had Sophia told them this? Or had the boys woven comfort out of their dreams, latching onto Sophia as a divine gift? The thought that Sarah's memory was being recast, reshaped by someone else's presence, was almost unbearable. Later that night, when the boys were asleep, Michael confronted Sophia in the kitchen. His voice trembled between anger and desperation. "They think you were sent by Sarah. Did you put that in their heads?" Sophia froze, her hand stilling on the dish she was drying. "No," she said quietly, but her tone carried something unspoken, something Michael couldn't untangle. She placed the plate down, met his gaze, and added, "Maybe children see truths we're too blind to accept." Her words pierced him, yet fueled his doubt. Was she manipulating their grief, or guiding them toward healing in a way he couldn't comprehend? He wanted to believe her, wanted to surrender to the peace she had brought, but the businessman in him demanded facts, demanded control. That control was slipping, and it terrified him. The breaking point came the next morning. Emily Parker, always discreet, approached Michael with something that drained the blood from his face. She had looked into Sophia's background more closely, and what she found didn't match the simple narrative they had been given. Yes, Sophia had worked at a daycare in Texas, but she had also disappeared from her hometown for nearly a year before arriving in Los Angeles. No one seemed to know exactly where she had been or what she had done during that time. "It's like she just vanished," Emily said, "and then reappeared in your home as if she had always belonged here." Michael felt the air leave his lungs. Every suspicion, every unanswered question now loomed larger, more dangerous. Was she hiding something? Was she running from something? Yet when he returned home and saw her kneeling in the grass with the twins, their laughter filling the garden, his doubts clashed violently with the reality before his eyes. She was the one who had brought them back from the edge. How could someone who had restored so much life also be a threat? That night, unable to sleep, Michael wandered into Sarah's old studio, untouched since her passing. The smell of her paint still lingered faintly in the air, her brushes lined up as if waiting for her return. He stood in the silence, clutching one of her unfinished canvases, and whispered, "What am I supposed to do?" It was then he realized the truth of his torment. The battle wasn't just about Sophia's secrets. It was about his own fear of letting someone else step into the sacred space Sarah had left behind. Loving Sophia, or even trusting her fully, would mean admitting that Sarah's absence could be filled, and part of him wasn't ready to betray the woman he had lost. If you were in Michael's place, would you dig deeper into Sophia's past at the risk of destroying the fragile healing she's brought? Or would you silence your doubts and let her continue transforming the family? Because as Michael stood in the dim light of Sarah's studio, torn between devotion to the past and the dangerous pull of the present, he realized that his next choice would either save his family or break them beyond repair. Michael didn't find answers in background checks, whispered suspicions, or the ache of sleepless nights. What he found came quietly, almost humbly, in the small moments that had begun to stitch his family back together. The boys' laughter at breakfast, their drawings taped proudly across the walls, the sound of their steady breathing through the monitor at night. These were the markers of healing, undeniable and real. And yet, his heart still battled between loyalty to Sarah's memory and the pull of what Sophia had brought into their lives. One late evening, after weeks of wrestling with silence, Michael finally sat with Sophia on the back porch overlooking the city. The twins were asleep, the house unusually still. He held Sarah's wedding ring in his palm, turning it over, feeling its familiar weight. "I promised her I would protect them," he said, his voice raw. "And now I don't know if keeping that promise means holding on to her memory or letting someone else carry them forward." Sophia didn't answer immediately. She simply looked at him, her eyes reflecting both the pain and strength she carried. Then she spoke with a quiet conviction that left no room for doubt. Protecting them doesn't mean chaining them to grief. It means teaching them that love can survive loss, that it can change shape and still remain true. Her words broke something open in him. For the first time, Michael allowed himself to weep, not the silent, contained grief of the past year, but a grief so unguarded it shook him to his core. Sophia didn't move closer, didn't try to claim a place that wasn't hers. She simply sat beside him, steady and present, the way Sarah once had when he faced the storms of business and life. In that moment, Michael understood that his conflict had never truly been about Sophia's secrets or the doctor's doubts. It had always been about his own fear of betraying the woman he had lost. Days later, Emily returned with more answers about Sophia's missing year. They were not the revelations Michael had feared, but they explained the quiet strength that seemed almost unnatural. Sophia had spent that year in Mexico, working at a community shelter for children orphaned by violence. She hadn't spoken of it because the memories were too heavy, the pain of those children too sacred to reduce to a resume bullet point. "I didn't want your boys to see me through stories of tragedy," she told Michael. "I wanted them to see me through what I could give them now." The truth cut through his remaining doubts. She was not perfect, not polished in the ways he once valued, but she had faced darkness and chosen love anyway. That was what made her dangerous. Not to his family, but to his grief, which she threatened to dissolve. On the anniversary of Sarah's passing, Michael feared the boys would unravel. Instead, Sophia suggested they plant a white rose bush in the garden as a way of remembering. Ethan and Ryan dug in the soil with their small hands, laughing through the dirt on their cheeks. When the plant was finally placed, Michael felt something shift. Sarah was not being replaced. She was being honored, her love carried forward into something living, something that would bloom year after year. That night, after the boys were asleep, Michael stood once more in Sarah's old studio. But this time he did not come with questions. He laid the ring on the windowsill beside one of her unfinished canvases and whispered, "I kept my promise." Then he closed the door, not as an ending, but as a continuation. He turned to find Sophia in the hallway, and for the first time, He didn't feel guilt at the sight of her. What he felt was acceptance, an acknowledgement that grief and hope could live side by side, neither erasing the other. Michael never forgot Sarah. He never stopped loving her. But as weeks turned to months, he also learned to love the sound of his son's laughter echoing through a home no longer haunted, in the presence of a woman who had walked into their lives not as a replacement, but as a bridge from despair to renewal. The greatest twist was not betrayal nor revelation, but the realization that healing often comes in forms we are too afraid at first to trust. What did this story make you feel about grief, love, and the possibility of healing after loss? If you enjoyed this journey, comment 100 below. Tell us from which country you're watching, and don't forget to share this video with your friends. Thank you for being with us on Hope Stories.